Hey everyone, Dr. Tony here. In this episode, we are going to share one of the 9 powerful presentations from our Autism Summit that we did earlier this year, which had the title, How to Unlock Your Child's Healing Potential Through the Vagus Nerve. Yeah, we're talking about healing, we're talking about full potential, and we got super nerdy, not just talking about the nervous system as a whole, but really diving into the vagus nerve. You're going to get so much out of this one alone, because when you understand the true healing potential of the nervous system, it all starts and centers from the vagus nerve. That's the number one area that is completely overlooked, not just in conventional medicine where they blame genetics and neurotransmitters, but even in functional and integrated medicine where we're talking about the gut-brain connection, the microbiome, inflammation. Well, guess what the literal anatomical gut-brain connection is? The vagus nerve. So nothing impacts your child's ability to heal, to repair, to restore, to regulate, to get back on track and stay on track developmentally like the vagus nerve. It has to do with digestion, respiration, immune function, and modulation of inflammation. And the vagus nerve has everything to do with social, emotional connection and speech and communication. So once you really learn through this episode, but really the entire summit, how to restore its function, that's when families start to see huge breakthroughs in sleep, speech, behavior, digestion, immune function, social emotional connection, and more. So what I love about talking about the vagus nerve is that when you do, and then you thread it into autism, everything seems so much more simple and straightforward instead of overwhelming and feeling like you have to do 87 things all at once just before lunch. Once you really learn how to tap into and harness nervous system regulation, vagus nerve stimulation, you realize that things that are in that ball game, like getting out in nature, like sensory play, like breath work, like certain supplements, those are good, but often they don't go deep enough when your child has been through the perfect storm and their nervous system isn't just a little bit off track, it's entirely off track, and it needs repair and reset and deeper versions of vagus nerve stimulation than deep breathing or devices could ever dream about doing. We're talking about lasers, we're talking about external stimulators, we're talking about primitive reflex work. It's all in this ballpark, but it doesn't get deep enough. And so everything we talk about on this episode and everything I asked every other presenter on the summit to talk about was what moves the needle most. This is not your general autism summit where we're talking about everything you've already heard before and things that barely get beneath the surface. And it's also not one of those autism summits or presentations where you can't actually put it in play, where it doesn't feel like it's actually doable. We're going to help get you the information you need that helps the most with your child's healing and transformation, and we're going to do it in the most simple and straightforward ways. So again, this is just one of the powerful, life-changing sessions that we did inside the Autism Summit. The experts that teach with this summit and share, they're my favorite humans, they're my favorite fellow nerds, they represent our favorite organizations. It's just a powerful, powerful thing. So normally we've been offering the recordings of the Autism Summit for $47, but with this Black Friday special, you can grab it for just $29 up through Black Friday. So take notes, enjoy this episode, get ready to dive deep into the full experience of nervous system repair, transformative healing, and the conversation that every family with autism really needs to hear at a deeper, more simple, straightforward, immediately implementable way. Enjoy this episode. Get a hold of that summit. Let's get started. Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, here we go, everybody. Diving deep into the vagus nerve and autism, how to really, truly unlock just multi-systems healing, unbelievable transformative quality of life improving healing for your child. The answer, the key really is getting deep into this vagus nerve neurology and science. And if you think we got pretty nerdy, pretty neurological, and pretty sciencey during my opening presentation with the perfect storm and the nervous system sequencing, we did, but this is going to dive deeper into what we would strongly argue is the most important nerve in the body, and it's definitely the most important nerve in autism. And really, once you understand this, as you will after this presentation, the vagus nerve is the key to unlocking pretty much every single illness in kids and parents. I hope you're tuning in too about your health and your well-being, because it's the same story for us. We are just completely overrun by sympathetic fight or flight stress, nervous system dysregulation and imbalance, and our vagus nerves are suppressed and shut down, which is why we can't sleep, we can't think straight, we can't heal either. And so this vagus nerve conversation is essential. And I'll start it off with a funny 180-degree comp, okay? Or whatever the term would be. When we say vagus, we are talking about, and I don't have the slides on yet, but I will soon. We are talking about VAGUS. The vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve. There's 12 cranial nerves, 2 on each side, just like the spinal and other sensory nerves, because we got 2 hemispheres of the brain, 2 halves of the brain, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 lungs. And so there needs to be this pair of the vagus nerve. We'll talk about it as one, but there's actually a right and left side. And the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. And the vagus nerve is called, it gets its Latin term there, vagus, because it's the wandering nerve is also its nickname. And that's where the title really comes in. But its opposite would be what a lot of people think of if they just were to auditorily hear the word Vegas. They would think Las Vegas, Nevada, which, funny enough, I told some farmer stories, I think, on the kickoff of my Perfect Storm one. But my farmer parents, because my oldest, wonderful, beautiful sister, Holly, her husband, Bill, they moved out to Las Vegas, Henderson, to be specific. So I grew up in a very relaxed, live out in the country, farm life, hardworking, but pretty regulated, pretty out in nature world. And the opposite of where I grew up and the opposite of a chill Midwest town is Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, when most people think of Vegas, they think of fight or flight, staying up, no sleep, tons of stress, and probably going bankrupt and making terrible life decisions. In order to get out of Las Vegas and its hyperactivity and its sense, it's just overstimulatory. I mean, there is no overstimulating. Never take a child with sensory issues and autism to Las Vegas, because it's just a freaking blast of sensory overdrive. And if you ever want to recover from a weekend in Las Vegas, and some of you parents are smiling, you're like, yeah, he's telling the truth about this one. You certainly need your Vegas, VAGUS, to activate, stimulate, regulate, and get your nervous system and your body to heal from a weekend in Las Vegas. So I've always found it quite ironic that the city is the opposite in its behavior and its functions as the nerve. And so that's just an easy way to remember about the vagus nerve. And we are going to get a lot more in detail rather than metaphorical with this conversation, because when you really look at the vagus nerve, it's the most important nerve in the entire body. Now, the truth is, I want to take it this way. If you look at the way our body is designed, how God designed our kids to be healthy, remember that. They are programmed to be healthy. Very few of the things that our kids are struggling with nowadays are actually truly genetic, that there's the coding got off track somehow. Truth is, there is slight, small genetic predispositions into like an autism, ADHD, anxiety conversation, but it is anything but a true genetic disorder. And so when we look at this concept with how health is designed, how optimal development for our kiddos, because if you say, what is autism? Well, it's probably the worst of developmental delays, right? Because autism encompasses gut issues, immune system issues, sensory motor issues, gross motor issues, motor delays, fine motor challenges, speech, communication, behavior, social emotional regulation difficulties, anxiety, hyperactivity, you name it. If there's a other set of diagnoses, they kind of all fit within this box. So when we look at that, we got to go, okay, well, we better take the most potent, the most effective approach. That's what this whole conversation has been about with all of our presenters. Like, what actually is the biggest root cause? Where do we need to look the most and do the most work to get our kids better, to get them to heal from this perfect storm and get to the other side of autism? Well, it's the nervous system. The nervous system is the boss system, the central and autonomic nervous system, to get a little bit nerdier. And then if we because the nervous system controls, remember there's that quote we probably kicked off in the opening one. It's a Bruce Lipton quote, Dr. Bruce Lipton, that says the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. So the function of the nervous system is to coordinate all other cells. You put cells together, you've got systems. Say the gut is a system, the immune system is a system, the endocrine system and hormones are a system. So the nervous system is more important than all of those in aggregate because it controls, connects, and coordinates all those. So I wanted to give you that opening address one more time to say, all right, so we know that the nervous system is where healing must first foundationally start. That's what we're talking about through all of these conversations and presentations. Now, deeper than that is diving into the nervous system and saying, okay, what's the most important element, nerve within the nervous system that we could tap into and really unlock some incredible healing potential. Hence the title of this one here, the vagus nerve and autism, unlocking true healing. I would love to put a longer title. If I had my way, we would have the longest titles in the whole world, and it would be unlocking true, foundational, transformational, unbelievable, indescribable healing for your child. Now that's a lot of adjectives, right? That's a lot of, whoa, he's really going for it. Well, that's how the nervous system works. There's a lot of healing in there, mom and dad. And specifically, when we get into the vagus nerve, there's a lot of healing in there. So I better get into this conversation about the vagus nerve. So what do we want you to know first about the vagus nerve? Couple of key points. We're just going to come out with a couple of statements about the vagus nerve, scientifically, factually, unbelievably true statements about the vagus nerve. And we're going to really relate them, obviously, into the autism conversation. And I want to do my best. I want to do as good a job as I can here to not just talk about, okay, when we have vagus nerve dysfunction, that is certainly a major player in autism spectrum disorder and all the struggles and all the symptoms and all the challenges that come with it. I don't want to stay in the red. I don't want to stay in the negative with this. I really want this presentation to be about the subtitle there, unlocking healing going forward. So I wish I had someone with me to be like, okay, you're going a little bit too much into the storm. Let's go into the healing, because that's how I want you to see and learn all about the vagus nerve. Parents, other providers, chiropractors even listening to this, I want you to know that this is where healing really happens. It happens at a deeper, more foundational level, and it happens at a broader multi-systems level as well. Like if there's a statement about activating and stimulating the vagus nerve, 1, it is a deeper, more foundational layer of healing. 2, it is a more potent, just more incredible, almost kind of like decibels of healing, and the quantity, you could kind of say both. And 3, it really spreads because you're about to see how many different functions the vagus nerve really controls. So introduce this a little bit, but the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body, and guess where it branches from? The brainstem. If it's a cranial nerve, that means it actually comes from what's kind of called the forebrain or the midbrain and the brain stem area. So this is not the perfect storm birth trauma presentation. That's the one I gave earlier, but the vagus nerve is most commonly injured and damaged from physical birth trauma at the brainstem, cranial, cervical, neck, spinal region. That's why this vagus nerve dysfunction is such a big deal in autism, and why birth trauma, as we call it, is the moonwalking bear, aka the thing that is happening to the majority of kiddos that no one is talking about. Traditional medicine continues to blame genetics. Holistic natural functional nutrition continues to blame toxins. And there's a little bit of genetics and there's a lot to do with toxins, but there's this whole smoking gun right in the middle that is happening to the majority of kids, where our vagus nerve, brainstem, nervous system function is injured, disrupted right at the beginning of life, right at the brainstem level, because that's what the vagus nerve does. It's the major healing, growth, development, regulation pathway. It is the primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, and it's always been nicknamed the rest and digest nerve. And that's an accurate nickname, but it's an incomplete nickname. It needs to be called the rest, regulation, immune system modulation, social emotional connection, and healing side and nerve within the system. This sucker is essential, and we're going to keep going into. So it leaves the brainstem and it actually goes down. Let me just turn off the slides for just a second. Those of you watching here, what you see is that the vagus nerve there's 12 cranial nerves, and it's one out of only two pairs of the cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve, and cranial nerve 11, which has a lot to do with the neck muscles and different things. That's why there's such a high correlation between birth trauma, torticollis, plagiocephaly, and motor challenges. We'll get into that with the vagus nerve. And so it's one of the 12 leave the brainstem area, actually go down through the foramen magnum, and they course their way, the vagus nerve especially, all the way down through the neck, into the thorax, into the cardiac, into the lungs, and into digestion, and as deep as the intestines and the diaphragm. So that's why the vagus nerve is essential for digestion. That's why the vagus nerve is essential for respiration. That's why the vagus nerve is essential for cardiac function. And now what we also know, have always known, but we're putting it together better as neuroscience, and science always makes things more clear as time goes on. The vagus nerve also has, so the one thing to say that I haven't said so far is the vagus nerve is 85 to 90% sensory. It is an afferent sensory receptor nerve. So it's telling the brain what's going on in the body. Pretty much every single system of the body, it's the internal environment sensory receptor and coordinator, okay? It's Starlink for every other system of the body. And so we also know that the vagus nerve has sensory afferent. So again, reporting information into the eyes and into the ears and into our social, emotional affect. So a child with autism struggles to make eye contact, social, emotional connection, because the vagus nerve is suppressed and dysfunctional. So its anatomy and how far it goes, hence the nickname the wandering nerve, actually tells us right out of a Guyton anatomy textbook, it tells us how essential to a multitude of functions the vagus nerve really is, which is the same thing as saying, okay, so if it's injured, if it's physically injured, the vagus nerve is also very susceptible to emotional trauma and toxic trauma. I know I'm a few slides ahead. I'm going to teach that later on. But the truth is that is where the vagus nerve is injured. And those are just a few of the things that then become dysfunctional when it is. Another way to look at the vagus nerve is it is the communication highway. It's the nerve that literally we talk about all the time in our work as pediatric chiropractors and PX docs. We talk about the brain body connection and how subluxation, nervous system dysfunction, and dysregulation get in the way and interfere with and disconnect that brain body connection. What we're really talking about, and the worst place to have disconnection and subluxation, would be along the track and the pathway of the vagus nerve. Because again, as we state here, the 80% of the vagus nerve's fibers are afferent. They're sensory. Now, if it's 80 to 85%, that also means the vagus nerve has other functions. This is a little bit beyond even this presentation, but the vagus nerve even controls motor functions. It controls a lot to do with visual motor function. It controls, which is eye contact, right? It has a lot to do with vestibular and balance, tone, and coordination and communication to the cerebellum and the inner ear. The vagus nerve has a ton to do with the muscles of latching and nursing for infants, and speech and verbalization and word formation and sentence structure throughout life. So the vagus nerve is huge in autism and just speech challenges, apraxia, dyspraxia, to go into the total tone of the body. The vagus nerve is involved in primarily sensory functions, internal environment, but it is also very intricately involved in motor functions. It's actually my job here, doing a 30-minute presentation on the vagus nerve and autism. This might be the hardest. It's kind of like doing the perfect storm in 30 minutes. It's just not possible. And so doing this one, I'm going to try to continue to get into this in 30 minutes or less. But goodness gracious, I could give you an entire week-long lecture about, I could give a whole semester course within chiropractic school or with anybody, any professional, any parent whatsoever. I could probably give an entire course on the vagus nerve and its connection with autism, because we are diving deeper here during this one than anybody else does with the vagus nerve and autism. But goodness gracious, I hope you guys know that there is so much more. And actually, as I say that, I should just sneak this in here. Anybody listening who wants to read anything and everything about the vagus nerve, nervous system function, nervous system healing, and autism, you should definitely spend a ton of time on our website, www.pxdocs.com, because I don't think anybody out there has written more articles on the vagus nerve, birth trauma, perfect storm, dysfunction, dysregulation. That's the bad side. And then on the good side, how to really unlock vagus nerve healing. So if you're loving what you're learning on this one, and you just want to nerd out and read and get, and all of our articles on the website have all the research citations connected to them. We have research citations throughout the website. So I know a lot of you parents, and obviously, especially the providers who are tapping in on this one, I know how much you love to read this stuff just like I do. I'm just saying it for all of us. Because and even if you don't, if you're not like super scientific Steve, you're going to see the way we write articles and do things on our website is really in parent speak. So providers go in there and learn out, but mainly it's a parent-focused website. And so trust me, it is nerdy, in-depth, scientific, research-backed information written in a very easy to understand and most importantly, easy to apply and help your child and family heal manner. Everything from our PX Docs platform is always written in simple, straightforward, actionable, I say written, but so is the Experience Miracles podcast, so is our Instagram, so is our Facebook, so are our webinars and summits like this. So everything we do is in that way. Okay. Back on track. Went on a sidebar there, which is probably not the thing that was going to help me get done in 30 minutes or less, right? I've mentioned this already, but it's worth mentioning again as you look at it here. The most important thing to know about the vagus nerve is that it is a multifunctional air traffic controlled nerve. It controls sleep, rest, recovery, and overall nervous system regulation. It controls digestion and gut-brain connection. It controls respiration, breathing, oxygenation, CSF flow into the brain, which is oxygenation into the brain, and then elimination of toxins into the brain. Oh, I could give you a whole nerd lecture about how toxic buildup inside our brain is really connected to not just our toxic environment, but to birth trauma and subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction. And the brain cannot detox if we don't get CSF, respiration, oxygenation, and vagus nerve function flowing. Number 4, heart rate, tone, adaptability. So the heart rate, you can tell if your vagus nerve is cooked, suppressed, shut down, subluxated, your heart rate goes through the roof. But it's not just about a high heart rate. It's about lack of variability and adaptability, which we'll look at with an HRV scan, because when we get done, we're going to say, okay, if we know that we had a high stress fertility and pregnancy journey, we know that we had birth trauma, forceps, vacuum, emergency C-section, cord wraps, manual assistance, sunny side up. However, the physical brain injury, brainstem injury, neck injury, cranium injury, that's a vagus nerve injury. And then, oh, by the way, the vagus nerve is extremely sensitive to toxins and inflammation. So what happens is our kids' vagus nerves get hit by every single element of the perfect storm, because autism's cause is multifactorial, and the solution, therefore, needs to be multifactorial. And what's crazy about saying what I'm saying right now is there's actually one thing, even though we're talking about a multitude of triggers of autism and causes, and a multitude of systems that get thrown off because of autism, the truth is you can tap into one singular thing, the vagus nerve and the nervous system, and you can address all of the factors and triggers that caused autism with one thing, and you can support and stimulate and connect and coordinate healing of all other systems, whether it be sleep or digestion or immune system modulation or respiration and CSF flow and draining and detoxing the brain and the body. All of it is done through the vagus nerve. So that right there, whatever time frame of time count stamp I just went on talking about the vagus nerve, that's how essential, complete, multifactorial it is to healing and recovery from autism, because it's also speech, swallowing, and facial tone, immune system, and inflammatory modulation. And, oh, by the way, a little something called the polyvagal theory. Shout out to a fellow Chicago land rock star doctor, Dr. Stephen Porges, who really put this work together with the polyvagal theory. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole today, because all you need to know about the vagus nerve is there's also sensory branches, connection branches that control our social, emotional, affect function as well. So when the vagus nerve is injured, those functions are limited, which is very much a conversation with autism, anxiety, and social withdrawal, which means, again, as I tried to say I would do earlier, which means when you activate, stimulate, and turn on the vagus nerve and you get this all going in the positive direction, you get so many different layers, phases, and connections in healing. So what do we know? That a child in the perfect storm, which is autism in full dose. Autism is a child who is stuck in fight or flight overdrive, and that chronic sympathetic dominance, subluxation, dysregulation, dysautonomia comes with suppressed, weakened, shut down vagus nerve tone. So what we really want you to know as we kind of round second and third base with this conversation is it can be stimulated, activated, repaired, rewired, restored, rebuilt, reconnected. I got a lot of really awesome positive words that mean very similar, synonymous things to you to talk about how we get healing to happen at the deepest foundational layer of the nervous system, which is the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system, and how we do it not just through stuff that you awesomely, hopefully, are seeing all over TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook nowadays, which is breath work, deep breathing, Wim Hof. Yeah, that's always what I always think of, right? How to reset the nervous system. Oh, there's saunas, there's cold plunges, there's deep breathing, there's walking in nature, there's humming, there's gargling, there's diet changes, there's supplements, there's even vagus nerve stimulating devices you can buy on the market on Amazon nowadays. What about all those? There's more than the little list I just ran through. Those are called vagus nerve and nervous system modulators. And I didn't quite know how to put it on the slides for those that are watching along with this one, because I want you to see, because I'm not great with graphics, I want you to know that there are things, so I'm actually going to, I want you to know that there are things that help regulate our nervous system and our vagal nerve tone and our parasympathetic system, and they are stimulatory and they are activating to the vagus nerve, but the vagus nerve needs to be at least somewhat functional, active, non-subluxated for these, what I'm going to call today, less potent things to be able to get into the vagus nerve and stimulate it and activate it. If there's one thing you take from this, it's that when a child goes through the perfect storm, and that during that what's called critical sensitive period we taught earlier of fetal development, the vagus nerve for so many of our kids with autism isn't just suppressed and dysfunctional. It never developed, turned on, and activated in the first place because fetal distress, fertility challenges, maternal distress gets in the way that early, that much of vagal nerve parasympathetic tone development. Even if that wasn't there, if there's birth intervention, physical injury to the brainstem, subluxation, interference and incoordination and suppression and dysfunction of vagus nerve dysfunction from physical trauma, brainstem, neck, spinal, cranial injury, that's where chiropractic comes in, then the vagus nerve is not even going to be receptive or active enough to get into deep breathing, to put down the Nintendo, to get off of TV and the iPad and the phone and get outside and go deep breathe and go walk in nature and go relax. How many of, and then toxins. If your child was exposed to so many different toxins, the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system are very sensitive to that as well. So here's the truth. What we see on the internet and social media today about how to heal your nervous system is a bit misleading, because for so many kids with autism especially, we first need to repair and rewire and reconnect their vagus nerve through more deep, potent, I would almost call it structural repair and foundational repair adjustments done with a very specific kind of chiropractic care that can get in deeper and unearth this dysfunction more potently and more stimulatorily. That's not a word, I don't think. But I want you to know that what is on the internet to maintain and promote health when you're already healthy and you're a health and wellness holistic nervous system influencer is freaking awesome. I couldn't be a bigger fan of the nervous system trending in our online and digital conversation. But that conversation is accurate, but it's incomplete. A child with autism tends to have such deep degrees of vagus nerve dysfunction that even things like primitive reflexes and lasers and movement-based therapies, doing 7 hours, 8 hours of intensive movement-based therapies, vibe plates, wobble boards, video games, flashing lights, they're doing this ATNR, ba-da-da-da. It's not deep enough either. Lasers don't get near as deep as a neurologically focused chiropractic adjustment. Primitive reflex, movement-based therapies don't get near as deep and stimulatory to the vagus nerve parasympathetic tone of the body. And so I am getting deeper into this presentation. I need to round third base and get you the information as to how to find this and how to get this fixed. Not to treat or cure autism. I said it with my other one. That is not what neurologically focused chiropractic does. We do not treat, we do not cure. We get into the nervous system. We release stuck sympathetic dominance. We activate, restore, repair, and get after suppressed dysfunctional vagus nerve tone. And when you do that, the brake pedal comes back on, and you have so much more bounce back and recovery. So this one is easy to see. We've mentioned it so many times that what really shuts down the vagus nerve, leads to sympathetic dominance, dysautonomia, and dysregulation is the high stress fertility, pregnancy, birth intervention, tons of toxins, antibiotics, medications, chemicals, and then emotional stress as well. So the three progressive stages of subluxation end up with the vagus nerve not just somewhat dysfunctional, but exhausted. Stage one of subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction is what we call sympathetic dominance. That's what we've been talking about at a 30,000 and 10,000 foot level the whole time. But to really finish the conversation as to how to unlock autism healing through the vagus nerve, we need to understand that stage two of subluxation comes from that stage one, sympathetic dominance, vagus nerve exhaustion. And it's really where developmental delays and nervous system, neurophysiological, digestive, gut, immune, autoimmune, motor planning. There's so many things in stage two of subluxation, which is that disorganization, dysregulation. We'd like to call this neurological confusion stage. So once subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction sets in, now there's this multitude of dysfunction within the different systems of the body. And a child can only be there for so long, especially if it goes all the way back to pregnancy, labor, delivery. They were colicky, they were fussy, they started to have missed milestones, they started to have sensory issues, tantrums, meltdowns, not sleeping, sick all the time. And now they don't grow out of those challenges. They grow into an autism diagnosis and or ADHD, sensory, anxiety, behavioral disorders, PDA, OCD, you name it. It comes with this conversation. And autism regression is really stage 3 of subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction, where the entire vagus nerve and the entire autonomic nervous system shuts down. When we have vagus nerve and neurological exhaustion and depletion, now there is no healing happening. There's no development happening. There's no connection and regulation and repair happening. This is those families with level 2 and level 3 autism where you are literally throwing the book. Every supplement, every binder, every chelator, every therapy, every intensive, every primitive reflex therapy, every stimulatory laser therapy, every nutritional and functional and integrative therapy, and every gut test and stool test and OT and PT and speech and craniosacral and fascial work. and tongue-tied revisions, and I could go on and on and on because I have been serving your incredible families for 20 years, and I love that there is more healing interventions, modalities, and options available to us, but there's only one that gets deep enough to reset, recharge, and repair the nervous system if it's already reached these 3 stages of subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction. And most especially if your child is in stage 2, and most especially if your child is in stage 3 neurological exhaustion, then I want you to know that the only thing foundational, deep, potent, rebuilding, restoring, and repairing enough to the vagus nerve and the nervous system is a very specific kind of chiropractic care called neurotonal PX Docs, nervous system focused chiropractic care. And that doesn't mean we aren't the biggest fans of nearly everything else out there. It means that the sequencing and the prioritization and getting deepest to the foundation first is what we need to do first. So the basics are amazing, but the basics are often what parents tell us we're doing it all and it's not changing anything. So if that, we've tried everything and it's nothing is working, we're doing it all and nothing is working, and my child and my entire family are entirely overwhelmed, confused, and exhausted, if that has been your conversation coming into this presentation, to this summit, to our podcast, to our platform, however you find this stuff, we are so glad we get to tell you that truth because we get to step into that storm with you. We have all sorts of neuroscientific understanding as to why you're there. And then we have all sorts of empathetic, personal, real life compassion and relatability to it as well. Because again, those of you that can see it, I know some might, just be listening in as we go along. But as you look at this slide, if you can see it, this is a picture of me adjusting my son in the upper cervical area after his birth was physically injured his brainstem and cranial region and his vagus nerve. And the very thing I'm doing with these light, gentle, stimulatory, activating adjustments is tapping into the vagus nerve, tapping into that sensory input into the brain, because I knew when my son was in the NICU having seizures, stuck in the storm, I knew he was sympathetic dominant, but there's no way to turn off the sympathetic nervous system. There's no on-off switch to our children's fight or flight switch to their autism, but there is an on switch to the parasympathetic vagal nerve tone. The most potent stimulatory activation point of vagus nerve connection is in the upper cervical, what are called the transition zones of the neurospinal system, so where the shoulders and the neck meet, and then down around the sacrum as well, really throughout the entire neurospinal and neurocranial system. The vagus nerve sensory afferents, so those receptors, are everywhere. So deep pressure, other sorts of massage, walking barefoot in nature, gargling, humming, breathing, activating the diaphragm, taking a deep breath, those are all very stimulatory to the vagus nerve, but they don't compare at all to the potency and the effectiveness of a specific neurotonal adjustment. So I keep referencing rounding third base and getting this to you in an actionable way. But what you are seeing here is you're seeing a set of insight scans, which all of our PX docs, and the way people ask all the time, how do I know that I'm seeing the right kind of chiropractor? One, we got a whole article about that on the website, a whole podcast episode. But the truth is, one, the only thing they talk about is the nervous system. Two, the only thing they measure when they do their exam is the nervous system, not through symptoms, not through palpation, not through posture, not through just movement and gait assessments. We do all this, by the way, not just by checking primitive reflexes, because primitive reflexes are simply a secondary feature of the primary problem, which is subluxation and nervous system dysfunction. So that would be more of actually, it's probably not fair to put it in a symptom box, but it's not a root cause box like subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction is. So through these insight scans, specifically to the vagus nerve conversation, using the thermal scans and then HRV, heart rate variability. We'll make sure and link all this as we go along here. But the HRV exam especially is a measure of vagal nerve tone or lack thereof, vagus nerve dysfunction, and autonomic balance and or lack thereof, which is called dysautonomia and dysregulation. I am so fired up about getting this information to you families in a way that says, okay, here's this nerdy thing, and here's this nerdy thing, and here's this element of the vagus nerve and the nervous system and subluxation and vagus nerve dysfunction and vagus nerve stimulation. But there's only one thing I really need to say to you in closing with this conversation, with this summit. You've got to find out. You need to get your kiddo into a PX doc's office, even if you need to get in the car and drive a long distance, even if you need to get on a plane and go to one of our offices that does intensive programs, and you can reach out to us. If you go to our website, which I got a slide for that next, if you go to our website, you plug in your city, you plug in your zip code, you plug in where you are, and you can't find a PX doctor, well, there are hundreds of us. As soon as we can keep training, we're traveling to Australia, we're going to the UK, we're going everywhere to train doctors as fast as we can, as many as we can, and as fully as we can, because we'll never send you to a doctor who doesn't know this stuff inside and out, including, most importantly, use this technology. You've got to get your child scanned. No matter what it takes, go find out. We need to go deeper foundationally with chiropractic into the nervous system, and then those other things can start to heal later on. So I want you to know this. Get excited. The fact that you've already cleaned up the environment, the fact that you've done so many things for your kiddo, you've primed the pump to nervous system healing. The thing that's missing is tapping into the nervous system at a deeper foundational vagus nerve level. So keep listening, keep healing, keep living healthy, keep living natural, and keep asking questions and getting information, because that's how healing happens. Oops, I went past that one. But again, the one thing we can do to know that we can help your child is find out. Once we have those scans, not only do we know if your child is subluxated, their vagus nerve is dysfunction, how tanked their nervous system is, how out of balance and dysregulated, dysautonomic and subluxated it is, but that's the point. We know how much. We can actually quantify it. We can locate subluxation. So what your PX docs are trained to do is to sit down knee to knee with you across the desk, or however they have it set up, after they do a deep dive consultation, get into your child's case history, figure out their perfect storm, and then most importantly, run these scans. Then they can sit down with you and they can show you, quantify it, map it, locate it. And now, because of these insight scans, we can create a customized, one, care plan for your child. So we'll know exactly the initial frequency, we'll know the duration, we'll know the number of visits. And then two, most importantly, this kind of chiropractic is vividly, markedly different than everything in healthcare and everything else in chiropractic. There is different techniques that different children respond to based upon different subluxation patterns and layers and levels of vagus nerve dysfunction. If your child is in stage 3 neurological exhaustion, they need to get adjusted differently. They need a different care plan, and they need a different kind of adjustments. If they are just stuck in more of that acute stage of sympathetic dominance, your child's a littler one, we're getting started early, that's awesome. They're not so dysregulated, they're not so neurologically exhausted, they haven't gone into regression. Well, that's a different set of clinical protocols in adjusting. And it's beyond the time I have left on this one, and it's beyond what I can really show or talk about. You got to get into the office. You got to see and experience that the pediatric experience, that's what PX stands for, pediatric experience. We want your child's experience with life. We want your experience as their parent to be the most incredible thing ever. And so you got to get into the office. You got to get your kiddo scanned. Go to pxdocs.com. Right on the homepage, right on the links with this thing is where you get. And then also, if you're joining us here via this incredible summit and you're here to learn a ton, but most importantly, to get the action steps that move the needle for autism healing and recovery the most. Remember, we only brought in the most, I'll just say it how I feel it as I close this one out. We only brought in the most in-depth, ridiculously experienced, badass truth tellers who know the science of autism at its most complete, deep foundational level, and put forth the interventions and the care protocols that are going to move the needle the most. So much healing. So there you can see the podcast. If you want to continue to rock and roll with us and get more information from us, grab your phone, hit the QR code, and get a hold of that. But I'll tell you this. I know it feels like, because it is, that traditional medicine, the pediatrician, the neurologist, the whoeverologist, they were surface level at best at helping your child with autism get some answers and get some healing. But I know where we are now in 2025 and the current environment of getting kids with autism better. It's not just toxins. It's nervous system dysfunction. It's subluxation. It's foundational dysregulation, dysautonomia, and vagus nerve dysfunction. There is structural, physical, deeper things going on within your child's brain-body connection that need to be addressed. Getting rid of toxins, taking a ton of supplements, working on detox and binders and COMP and MTHFR and all the and heavy metals and GI mapping and stool sampling and too much strep and too many things. There's stuff going on deeper. That is that functional, integrative, nutritional, lifestyle approach to healing autism is certainly many layers deeper than the pediatrician and the neurologist go. But there's actually still more layers. There's things going on even deeper, more foundational, causing your child to be stuck in that storm called autism. We know what those deeper layers are. We've found them. We can measure them. We can find them. And most importantly, by far most importantly, more importantly than finding it through the insight scans, which is the first step that all this starts with, we can do something about them. You will be blown away when your child just first starts getting adjusted and we start activating the vagus nerve and releasing that stuck sympathetic stress. They start falling asleep easier, staying asleep better, getting better sleep, being more rested, recovering, and regulated better the next day. They start digesting and pooping and detoxing naturally, neurologically. We don't change anything with their nutrition or supplements or binders to make this happen. And they start detoxing. They start moving their sensory, motor, tone, coordination. All of a sudden, they're not so hypersensitive and wound up. They're more relaxed and less tense. Their core's not so weak. It's more strong. Their stimming isn't so active. Their seizures begin to lessen. Their sensory meltdowns start to calm. Their transitions start to get easier. Their immune system starts to get stronger. See, when you start to tap into nervous system healing, vagus nerve healing, that one thing is tapping in to all of these other things in a very specific, sequential, inside-out, transformational, almost indescribable. I do my very best on these summits, webinars, articles, podcasts, videos. We make content about this all the time. And if I'm being honest, all day, every day in practice, because I'm still in practice, serving kids, adjusting, watching this healing happening right before my eyes and right before my heart. And so often it leaves me in disbelief. And we are the ones who sorted out all this science, put together all this perfect storm, science, presentation, and clinical protocols. So if there's anybody on earth who should probably not be in disbelief that children, even with level 3 severe autism, can accomplish and achieve full, incredible, transformational healing and recovery, it should probably be me, who's not so left in disbelief and awe about that happening. Because I can get on a slide deck or get into an article or fire up my laptop or fire up my microphone and I can teach you and explain to you neuroscientifically how that is happening and what we're doing to be the spark, be the catalyst to make it happen. But in the same breath, this is why I love doing this so much and I smile so much and therefore have so many forehead wrinkles from such a long life of smiling, because it's also mystifying, indescribable in the best of ways, because really only God can explain it at the level that any of us could really even fathom is possible. But that's what's possible, because our kids are made to heal. Their nervous systems are designed to be healthy, not sick. Their nervous systems are designed for recovery, repair, restoration, not sickness, dysfunction, and dysregulation. So what chiropractic does, we're not the miracle. Your child's the miracle. We're not the hero. You are. You found this. You're doing this work. You're staying up late at night searching for answers. You're flying all over the place, finding the doctors who can really be the truth tellers and the catalyst and the spark to get your child healing. So I love my job. It's probably the greatest understatement I could ever leave you with. Because as much as I understand it, scientifically, neurologically, from a clinical protocol standpoint, I go to practice all day, every day. I get reports from you guys through our PX Docs platform of your child healing. And in the best of ways, it leaves me in awe. And I don't know anything more awesome or more incredible than that. So I cannot thank you anymore there's no words to say thank you for showing up on this platform with us, going through this summit, jamming with us on Facebook, Instagram, podcast, however you found this, are finding this, are connecting to this. We couldn't be more grateful and more excited that you have. The most important thing to do from here is to take that action step to get started. And if you've already got started, remember, it's not always overnight. It's never overnight. It's not always smooth. It's not always fast. It's usually quite a journey on the road to recovery, and it's the most worth it. Stick with it. You got this. God's got this. We got this together journey there ever is. God bless. Be well. Thanks for tuning in. When we send out the replays, please share this far and wide with everyone you know in the autism community, because this is the information that can transform millions of kids' lives and truly get them unlocked and get them on the road to full and optimal healing. And for millions of kids, I absolutely believe recovery is possible.